we've got to stop thinking about what to do next week and next month. We've got to start thinking about what to do in the decades ahead. This is something that the American foreign policy establishment is notoriously bad at doing. So I'm trying to make my contribution. Here's what I see. I think that in the future, the United States needs to look for partners in that region. I think we've shown that we don't fully understand the subtleties there, although we have this idea we get the Middle East. Other countries don't get the Middle East, including countries that are there. Therefore, our policies are the wise ones, and foolish countries in that region that have other ideas are just ignorant and don't know how really to resolve these problems. So, who should be our partners? I believe when a country looks for partners, we should be looking for countries that fit two criteria. Number one, they should be countries that have long-term strategic goals that are relatively congruent with ours. But that isn't enough. You also need one other thing, because alliances and partnerships that are based on just relationships between ruling elites, government-to-government alliances, often tend to be very weak because those regimes with which we partner are often very unpopular in their own country. And then since people don't like their regimes, they see the U.S. friendly with those regimes, then they don't like us either. So there needs to be a second basis for our relationship with our partners, and that is you need to find countries to partner with whose societies are similar to your own. If you look around the Muslim Middle East, there are only two countries that fit those two criteria: long-term strategic goals similar to ours and societies that share values like ours. And those are Turkey and Iran. Now, a partnership among those three countries right now would be difficult to achieve, although I think it might not be as difficult as some people imagine if we really open our minds and try to be creative here. On the other hand, over the long run, I think at the very least we shouldn't be doing anything that will make this partnership more difficult in the future. Turkey is producing a very interesting new approach to foreign affairs. They're essentially telling the United States, we share your values. We share your goals in this part of the world. We're your military ally. We support the same principles that you support. But we have some advice on tactics for you. You can't be so confrontational here. You've got to ratchet down your rhetoric and try to resolve some of the problems in this region through diplomacy and compromise and negotiation. America is not ready for that kind of advice yet. And that's what really lies behind the friction of these last few weeks between Turkey and the United States. Let's talk about Turkey, the United States, and Israel. Talk about the U.S. relationship. Actually, interestingly, you talk about the U.S. and their relationship with Israel and Saudi Arabia. And now you're talking about an alliance with Turkey and Iran. But talk about the attack on the Gaza flotilla by the Israeli commandos and what this has meant for Turkey and Israel. There's been a lot of talk recently about the Islamization of Turkish society, which I think is way overblown. What you're really seeing is a more full expression of democracy now that Turks are free to be what they want. At the same time, there's been this parallel view, particularly in recent weeks, that Turkey is adopting a kind of a more Islamic or Middle East-focused foreign policy, and they've essentially become a frenemy. They've flipped sides. They're a potential defector from the coalition of the virtuous over to Iran and crazy Islamists. This also is way exaggerated. What we've seen in the last few weeks between Turkey and Israel is not the result of some great surge of Islamist belief or anti-Israel passion in Turkey. In fact, Turkey and Israel have had very good relations over decades. Turkey was one of the first countries to recognize Israel when it was created in the late 1940s. The relationship between the two has been economic, it's been political, and it's even been military. So they have a long history, and even before the establishment of the state of Turkey, relations between Ottoman Empire and Jews were fantastic. Jews were flooding into the Ottoman Empire from Poland and Russia and from Spain and Germany for centuries. So there's a long history there. So why did this conflict emerge? I think it really is a function of what happened in Gaza. It's hard for us in America to realize what it's like sitting in Turkey or somewhere else in the Middle East. You're watching every single day on your TV what's going on in Gaza. People are really focused on Gaza, and that project has been going on for well over a year now. Every time there's an episode in Gaza, it gets replayed over and over. You remember that Turkey was negotiating a secret deal between Israel and Syria at the time of the Gaza invasion. And Turkey was shocked that just as this secret new breakthrough toward peace seemed like it was imminent between Israel and Syria, the Turks woke up one morning and found out that the whole thing had been blown up because Israel has just invaded Gaza. So the Turks were furious. They really felt betrayed. Last year's blow-up at Davos between the Turkish Prime Minister, Tayyip Erdogan, and the President of Israel was not based on just general hostility. It was specifically about Gaza. And this flotilla is not a Turkish attack on Israel. What it is a statement by Turkey that we find the Gaza occupation intolerable. So I think we should separate that particular episode, what's been happening in Gaza over the last 18 months, from the larger Turkey-Israel problem. I think this relationship is not lost forever. I'd like to see both sides start to ratchet down their rhetoric now and try to pursue a more conciliatory policy. And I think that is possible because what the Turks are really looking for is not the end of Israel or huge changes in Israel. What they're looking for is changes in Gaza. If that can start to happen, I think this relationship can be repaired. Well,
what about Israel attacking this ship and killing 8 Turks, 1 Turkish-American? What made Israel, in its relationship with Turkey, think that they could get away with this?
I think even friends of Israel in the United States are beginning to ask themselves, is Israel acting in ways that are really going to protect its long-term security, or is Israel acting in ways that actually endanger its long-term security? Israel is not going to be able to maintain its position in the Middle East indefinitely just by military means. I think the attack on the ship in the Mediterranean that was headed for Gaza was an expression of Israeli desire to set the rules for that part of the world. They don't want any challenge. However, I think this operation wound up being a success for the planners of the flotilla beyond anything they could have imagined. It's another great gift that Israel has given its so-called enemies in Hamas and in Gaza. In the long run, what's going to protect Israel is a stable neighborhood. Therefore, countries on the outside like the United States that want to help guarantee Israel's long-term survival should be trying to encourage it to pursue policies and should be pursuing policies themselves that result in a calming of tensions in that region. In an odd way, Israel and Iran are, in one sense, in a somewhat comparable position right now. They're the 2 countries that many other countries in the Middle East don't like, and they're the 2 countries that lots of countries in the world don't like. There's a tremendous amount of anti-Israel emotion running around the world now, and a tremendous amount of anti-Iran emotion. A lot of big powers and smaller countries, too, would love to punish those countries. We're very angry at them. There's a great impulse to try to sanction them and push them into a corner. But actually, it's not a good idea to try to isolate countries, and I'm talking about both Iran and Israel, to punish them, sanction them, make them feel alone and friendless. Instead, a policy of balance between Iran and Israel would aim to pull both of them out of their isolation and out of their paranoia. This ought to be the goal of American policy, not trying to use the rhetoric and policies of the past to beat Iran with a stick and then essentially to say that what Israel does is usually tolerable, even though they can be rascals at times, but in the end, we're always their friend. We need to find a way in which the interests of these 2 countries, both of which actually coincide over the long run, can be brought a little closer together in the short run.
On Turkey, before we break and then come back to discuss this further, Stephen Kinzer, the repression of Kurds, of Armenians, where does that fit into the democratic tradition that you spoke about?
Turkey is going around the world now telling everybody, including the United States, it's no good to try to resolve political conflicts by force. You have to do it by conciliation, by negotiation, by compromise. Not surprisingly, there must be plenty of people in the world who at least think, if they don't say, to Turkey, why don't you follow your own advice? When you're dealing with the Kurds in southeastern Turkey, why don't you announce that the idea of military confrontation with the Kurdish revolutionary movement is over, and we're going to try to resolve the Kurdish problem with the same conciliatory policies that we're advocating others to follow. There's no doubt that this is one of the last remaining drags on Turkey's ability to play a big role in that region as the chief conciliator. Turkey has to start following its own advice, not just with the Kurds, but I would say also with Israel. After this terrible conflict that happened a couple of weeks ago on the Mediterranean, I'd like to see Turkey now say, the world understands the situation. Everything that happened was very clear. Now it's time to move forward and see if Turkey can try to build on this to find a relationship that not only will allow it to coexist again in a more friendly way with Israel, but will also produce some benefit for the people of Gaza.
Stephen Kinzer, former New York Times foreign correspondent. We're going to come back to our discussion. His new book is called Reset: Iran, Turkey, and America's Future.